There were gods before the gods you know, powers that existed before the first Greek temple was ever built, before Zeus raised his lightning, before the Olympians claimed the sky. And the reason you've never heard their names, that silence is not an accident, that silence was chosen. Africa did not just birth humanity, it birthed the divine, and the gods that rose from that soil were not gentle, were not distant, were not the kind of beings who sat comfortably on a mountain waiting to be prayed to. These were forces that tore through the fabric of what was possible, forces that made the earth remember it was mortal, forces that other traditions, much later, much quieter, borrowed from, were terrified of, and then buried under centuries of silence. But here is the first thing you need to understand. These gods were never truly gone. They were simply waiting, and what they were waiting for is the part that should unsettle you. Oya came first, not in chronology, but in consequence. In the Yoruba tradition, she is the goddess of storms, of winds, of the marketplace, and of death, not death as an ending, death as a transition so violent it rearranges everything that comes after. When Oya moves, she does not announce herself. The wind does not warn you before it takes the roof off your house. The tornado does not apologize. Oya was the kind of goddess that even the other gods stepped back from. And there is a reason for that, a reason that goes far deeper than her storms. Oya was married to Shango, and what happened between those two divine forces, that is where the real terror begins. Shango, the Orisha of thunder, lightning, and fire, the god of justice who was also a god of war, he ruled with an authority that was absolute, or at least, that is what he believed. But Shango had a rage in him that even divine power could not contain. He is said to have accidentally killed his own children with a lightning bolt thrown in fury. He destroyed his own palace with fire conjured from his own mouth. He was a king before he was a god, a human king who ascended, and he carried every human flaw into divinity with him. Pride, fury, the kind of love that becomes possessive then destructive. And Oya stayed beside him, not out of weakness, out of something far more dangerous. She was the only force in existence that could match him. And the day she decided she had matched him enough, the day she stopped holding back, that was the day the sky itself split open. But stay with that for a moment, because there is something happening beneath the surface of this story that the myths only barely admit to. Shango and Oya were not just two gods in conflict. They were two cosmic principles at war, lightning and wind, the strike and the aftermath. And when those two forces turned on each other, the devastation was not contained to the heavens. It came down. It always comes down. And yet, Shango and Oya were not even the most powerful forces in the Yoruba cosmos. That position, contested, dangerous, and impossible to hold safely, belonged to someone else entirely. Obatala, the creator of human bodies, the god of purity, of white cloth of the mind. He was the one Olodumare, the supreme being, the source above all sources, trusted with the task of shaping humanity itself, not creating souls, creating the physical form that souls would inhabit. And Obatala did the work with the kind of divine precision that demands absolute sobriety, absolute stillness, absolute care. But there was a day, and the myths do not let you forget this, there was a day when Obatala drank palm wine before finishing his work. He drank and he kept shaping, and in that compromised state, his hands made bodies that were incomplete, bodies that were different, bodies that the world would not always be kind to. And when Obatala returned to sobriety and understood what he had done, the guilt nearly unmade him, not because someone punished him. Because he chose, from that moment forward, to be the eternal protector of every person his imperfection had shaped. He gave himself a burden that no other Orisha accepted voluntarily. That kind of god, a god who carries his own failure as a sacred responsibility, that is not a myth. That is something far more terrifying to contemplate, because it suggests the divine is not exempt from consequences. It suggests that even creation can go wrong. And if creation can go wrong, what else is unstable? Move west and the answer gets darker. Move into the tradition of the Akan people of what is now Ghana, and you encounter Nyame, the sky god, the supreme deity, the one who holds the universe together. But Nyame is not a god you approach directly. Nyame is a god you approach through his children, through intermediaries, through the careful navigation of a divine court so complex it mirrors every political hierarchy humanity ever invented. Because Nyame understood something that the Olympians seemingly did not. Absolute power, directly accessible, is not power. It is chaos. Nyame structured divinity like a sovereign structures a kingdom, with distance, with hierarchy, with systems designed to prevent any single point of contact from becoming the place where everything collapses. But here is what Nyame also knew, and what the myths whisper if you listen closely enough. Every system of order has a point of failure. Every structure has a crack. And the thing moving toward that crack, the thing Nyame's entire cosmic court was designed to prevent from reaching it, was called Sasabonsum. The name should stop you cold. Sasabonsum is a creature from Akan mythology, part god, part demon, entirely outside every category the cosmos tried to impose on him. He was not evil in the way a villain is evil. He was disorder in the way a fire is disorder. He existed in the deep forests, at the edges of the known world, specifically in the places where human certainty breaks down, where the path ends, where the light doesn't reach. He had iron hooks for feet. He hung from treetops waiting. Not hunting, waiting. As if he knew that eventually, everything that walked too far into uncertainty would come to him. You did not encounter Sasabonsum by making a mistake. You encountered him by going somewhere you were never supposed to reach. And now ask yourself, what were the Akan myths warning people not to reach? What knowledge was so dangerous that the cosmic order built a monster to guard the border? That question does not have a comfortable answer, but hold it, because the story is about to turn. Because there is another tradition, running parallel, just as ancient, just as vast, that was not content to simply guard the borders of forbidden knowledge. This tradition sent its gods into that darkness deliberately. The Kemetic tradition, ancient Egypt. And the god at the center of this next revelation is one whose name you may recognize, but whose true nature has been misrepresented for so long that what you think you know may be exactly wrong. Zed. You have been told Set was the god of evil. You have been told he was the villain of the Egyptian pantheon, the murderer of Osiris, the enemy of Horus, the dark force that threatened divine order. And all of that is true. All of that is not the whole story. What the simplified telling leaves out is this. Set was also the protector of Ra. Every single night, as Ra's solar bark traveled through the underworld, through the darkness beneath existence, it was Set who stood at the prow of that boat. It was Set who faced Apep, the serpent of chaos, the creature so ancient and so enormous that it threatened to consume the sun and extinguish existence itself. And Set fought it every night, with a ferocity that no other god was capable of, because only a force of chaos is powerful enough to defeat a greater chaos. Let that land. The Egyptians did not hide from this paradox. They leaned into it. They built temples to Set. They gave him an army. They made him a god of desert storms, of foreign lands, of the uncategorizable, and they also made him the last line of defense between existence and annihilation. He was the weapon the gods needed precisely because he was too dangerous to fully trust. And the moment that balance broke, the moment Set stopped being the controlled chaos and became the uncontrolled, the moment he killed Osiris, scattered his body across Egypt, and declared himself the only power worth worshipping, everything changed. The cosmic order did not respond with negotiation. It responded with Horus. With a war that lasted so long the myths measure it in decades, not battles. A war between the sky god and the storm god for the right to define what divine power meant. And here is the twist that the myths have buried for thousands of years. Horus did not simply win. The gods who judged the final contest between Horus and Set, the divine tribunal, the Ennead, they did not reach a clean verdict. For a long time they were divided. For a period that some texts suggest stretched across 80 years of conflict, the gods could not decide which principle should govern, the legitimacy of inherited order or the raw dominance of the most powerful force in the room. Ra himself, the supreme solar deity, initially backed Set. Initially, because Ra understood what the others were reluctant to admit, that the universe without chaos is not a universe in balance. It is a universe that has forgotten what it is. But something shifted. Something in the testimony, something in the evidence of what Set had done to Osiris, to Horus, to the stability of creation itself, something turned the tribunal. And when it turned absolutely. Set was not destroyed. He was reassigned, put back on the prow of Ra's boat, reduced from a claimant to a function. And the question that should haunt you is whether that was justice, or whether that was the cosmic order simply finding a more efficient use for a power too dangerous to eliminate. Keep watching, because what comes next is where this story breaks open. There is a name from the same Kemetic tradition that almost never appears in the popular telling, a goddess so fundamental, so structurally essential to the Egyptian cosmos that her absence is not metaphorical, it is catastrophic. When she leaves, the universe stops working. When she withdraws, the gods do not simply grieve. They panic. They send delegations. They beg. They try every form of divine persuasion available to them, because without her, nothing, not the sun, not the floods, not the growing season, not the balance between life and death, nothing continues. Her name is Hathor, or, in her more dangerous aspect, Sekhmet. Understand this carefully. Hathor and Sekhmet are not two goddesses. They are two faces of one cosmic principle, and the difference between those faces is the difference between abundance and annihilation. Hathor is love, music, fertility, beauty, the cow goddess who nurses the sun back to strength. Sekhmet is the eye of Ra, the weapon Ra created from his own power when humanity rose against him and needed to be punished. Sekhmet is the lioness. She is plague, war, the desert heat that does not relent, the fever that breaks the body before it breaks the spirit. Ra sent her to punish humanity, and she did. She began killing, and then she did not stop. She could not stop. This is the part of the myth that most people have never heard. Ra looked down at what his own weapon was doing and realized it had exceeded his intention. The punishment had become extinction. His own created force, born of his own rage, was going to kill every human being on Earth, and he could not simply recall her. She was too deep in the slaughter. She was too far gone in the purpose he had given her. So Ra did not fight her. He did not overpower her. He flooded the fields with red-dyed beer, and she drank it thinking it was blood, and in her drunkenness she forgot. She forgot what she had started. She woke as Hathor, and the killings stopped. The most powerful weapon in the Egyptian cosmos, and the only thing that could stop her was a trick, not strength, not divine authority, not a superior power, a trick. What does that tell you about the nature of unstoppable force? What does that tell you about what happens when the thing designed to protect you becomes the thing you cannot control? Hold that question, because it applies to every divine tradition we are about to enter. Cross the continent, move south and east, into the traditions of the Zulu, the Shona, the people of Central and Southern Africa. And here the cosmic architecture shifts again, becomes something that the Western framing of mythology has almost no category for. Because in these traditions, the divine is not primarily located in individual gods with individual personalities and individual conflicts. The divine is located in the ancestors, in the Amadlozi, in the spirits of those who came before, who did not fully leave, who exist in a dimension just adjacent to the living world, close enough to intervene, close enough to be offended, close enough to protect or to destroy. And the force that moves through all of them, the force that the traditions of the Zulu call Unkulunkulu, is something that modern mythology frameworks consistently misrepresent as a simple sky god or creator figure. That translation loses everything. Unkulunkulu literally means the ancient of ancients. He is not a god who acts. He is the origin point from which all action became possible. He is the moment before the first moment. And the traditions are very specific about something that should unsettle every framework you have brought to this. Unkulunkulu is not present. He created and he withdrew. He made existence possible and then removed himself from it, not out of indifference, but because his continued presence would prevent anything from developing on its own terms. A god who knew his own presence was too powerful to allow creation to breathe. What does that kind of self-awareness cost? What kind of divine consciousness can look at its own power and say, I must become absent so that others can become real? But here is where the tradition stops being philosophical and becomes dangerous again. Because if Unkulunkulu is absent, if the highest divine principle has deliberately withdrawn, then what fills that space? The ancestors fill it. The Amadlozi fill it. And the ancestors are not universally benevolent. They carry what they carried in life: grudges, territorial authority, unresolved conflicts. The ancestor spirits of Zulu tradition are not the gentle departed of sanitized mythology. They are the compressed experience of generations, and they can be angered, and when angered, the consequences move through families, through lineages, through entire communities in ways that no individual can predict or easily stop. This is a cosmology where divine power is distributed not in a hierarchy of Olympian gods, but in a web of ancestral authority that stretches backwards through time and cannot be separated from the living present. The past is not behind you in these traditions. The past is parallel to you, and it is watching. Now feel the weight of everything that has been accumulating in this story, because we are reaching the place where it all converges. We are reaching the figure that exists at the intersection of every tradition we have touched, the trickster, the opener of roads, the force that connects every other force and cannot be bypassed, cannot be ignored, and absolutely cannot be deceived. Eshu, called Legba in the Fon and Yu traditions of Benin and Togo, called Exu in the diaspora traditions of Brazil, the gatekeeper of the crossroads, the messenger of the Orishas, the first and last god invoked in every ceremony, because without his permission, no communication between the human and the divine is possible. None, not a prayer, not a ritual, not a sacrifice. Eshu controls the channel through which every other divine force operates, and this is not a supporting role. This is the most structurally central position in the entire cosmological architecture. Here is what the traditions understand that simple retellings miss. Eshu is not a trickster because he is mischievous. He is a trickster because reality itself is ambiguous, because every message changes in the transmission, because the word you speak and the word that is heard are never identical. Eshu embodies that gap, the space between intention and consequence, between prayer and answer, between what you asked for and what you received. He is not evil. He is the principle of interference, of static, of the fundamental unpredictability that lives in every act of communication. And now consider what it means that this principle, this divine embodiment of ambiguity, sits at the threshold of every interaction between humanity and the divine. It means the gods never receive your prayers exactly as you send them. It means the answers you receive have already passed through a filter that introduces variables you cannot account for. Eshu is not a corruption in the system. He is the truth of the system. The system was always this uncertain. He just makes it visible. The Fon tradition gives Legba an additional dimension that should stop you cold. He is described as simultaneously the youngest and the oldest of the divine forces, the last born of the supreme deity Mawulisa, and yet somehow the one who came before everything else, the one who must be acknowledged before the beginning can begin. How can the youngest be the oldest? How can the last be the first? The traditions do not resolve this paradox. They preserve it. Because the answer is more important than the resolution. The answer is that time, in these cosmologies, does not move in one direction. The divine does not obey sequence. And the force that most embodies this truth is the one standing at every crossroads, waiting for you to choose a direction, knowing that every direction loops back. We are in the final act now, and the final act belongs to the goddess no mythology has been able to contain, no tradition has been able to fully explain, and no single name has been able to hold. Her oldest name may be Isis, but the Egyptians called her Auset, and what Auset represents is not what the abbreviated mythology of later centuries made of her, the grieving wife, the devoted mother, the gentle healer. Those are real aspects. They are not the whole truth. Auset is the goddess of magic, of Heka, the oldest and most fundamental force in Egyptian cosmology, the creative power that existed before the gods and before the universe. She is the one who reassembled Osiris from 14 scattered pieces and breathed him back to life. She is the one who protected the infant Horus in the marshes of Chemnes, surviving assassination attempts, divine hostility, and the constant predation of Set's forces through wit alone. She is the one who, when she needed to know the secret name of Ra, the true name that contained all of his power, she tricked him into revealing it by creating a serpent from his own divine saliva and allowing it to bite him, then offering the cure only in exchange for his most protected secret. She tricked the supreme solar deity. She extracted his true name, the name that is his power, and she used it to elevate herself and Horus beyond the reach of any divine authority that might otherwise oppose them. This is not a supporting character. This is the most tactically sophisticated mind in the Egyptian cosmos, wrapped in the image of a goddess so associated with nurturing that her danger is perpetually underestimated. And she knew exactly how powerful the underestimation was. She used it deliberately. But here is the final revelation, the one that ties everything together, the one that changes the shape of every story you have just heard. Every tradition we have moved through, Yoruba, Akan, Kemetic, Zulu, Fon, they are not separate mythologies. They are not isolated cultural products with accidental similarities. They are related. They share structural DNA. The trickster at the crossroads, the storm god with uncontrollable rage, the creator who withdraws from the creation, the divine feminine who is simultaneously nurturing and catastrophically dangerous, the cosmic monster that disorder requires to maintain order. These figures appear again and again because they are describing something real, something that human consciousness, across thousands of miles and thousands of years, kept independently encountering and trying to name. And what they were trying to name was this: power at its most fundamental level cannot be safely possessed. It can only be temporarily inhabited. Every god in every tradition you have just heard, Oya, Shango, Obatala, Set, Sekhmet, Eshu, Auset, every single one of them exists in a state of perpetual tension between what they are and what they contain. The power is always slightly too large for the vessel. The storm is always slightly stronger than the god who calls it. The magic is always slightly older than the goddess who wields it. And the moment that tension resolves, the moment any divine force fully becomes what it contains, the cosmos does not celebrate, it trembles, and it recalibrates, and something is lost in that recalibration that can never be recovered. These were not primitive stories. These were the most sophisticated attempts human consciousness has ever made to map the terrain of power, its costs, its contradictions, its absolute refusal to be clean or simple or safe. The Greeks put their gods on a mountain and gave them human dramas. The African traditions put their gods inside the weather, inside the dead, inside the crack between intention and consequence, inside the moment of transition between life and death, inside the crossroads where every road is simultaneously possible and none are guaranteed. That is not a less sophisticated cosmology. That is a more honest one. And the reason these gods were buried, the reason their names do not appear in the same breath as Zeus and Athene and Poseidon in the popular imagination, that reason is not about merit. It is not about complexity. It is not about the sophistication of the traditions that carried them. It is about what was convenient to remember and what was profitable to forget, what was elevated and what was suppressed. But suppression is not erasure. Ask Oya, she'll answer with a storm. Ask Set, he'll answer from the prow of a boat navigating darkness. Ask Eshu, he'll answer from the crossroads where your certainty ends and the real question begins. These gods are not the gods you've heard of. They are the gods that the gods you've heard of were afraid of. They are the first principles, the original tensions, the forces that existed before anyone built a system around them, and the forces that will exist long after every system built to contain them has collapsed. The silence around their names was never permanent. It was always just a long night. And the thing about a long night is you can feel the moment it starts to end, not by the light, by the fact that the darkness shifts, by the fact that something in the air changes, by the fact that the crossroads ahead of you stops feeling like an obstacle and starts feeling like an arrival. They were always there, and now you know it. And knowing, in every one of these traditions, is never neutral. Knowing always costs something. Knowing always changes what comes next. The only question that remains is what you do with it.